She found him in a furnace of silk and smoke, shielded by a wall of fire, clutching two carriers like they were the only unburned things left in his world. He was the devil's son, and he was screaming at her to run. Stephanie Holloway wasn't supposed to be a hero. She was a struggling art student drowning in tuition debt, working the graveyard shift delivering overpriced takeout to people who could afford penthouses she'd never see the inside of. Tonight's order was different. A $200 tip for a single delivery to Gleamwood Heights, the kind of money that would keep her lights on for another month. She needed it desperately enough to ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut when she stepped into the elevator. But when those doors opened on the 40th floor, the smell hit her first, acrid smoke curling through the marble hallway like black fingers. Then she saw it, the penthouse door blown open, flames licking the walls, and inside, a man in an expensive suit sat collapsed against the wall, twin infant carriers clutched in his tattooed arms. His face was carved with desperation and rage, his dark eyes locking onto hers through the haze. "Get out!" he roared, his voice shredded by smoke. But Stephanie couldn't move. Because 9 years ago, she'd frozen just like this. She'd watched her little brother's car sink into freezing water while her feet stayed glued to the dock. She'd been too afraid, too slow, and he'd drowned screaming her name. Not again. Never again. If you want to see what happens when an ordinary girl saves the most dangerous man in the city, and becomes his queen in the process, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't believe where this story goes. Stephanie's hands were already moving before her mind caught up. She ripped off her delivery jacket, pressed it against her mouth, and plunged into the inferno. The heat slammed into her like a physical wall. Flames crawled up the silk curtains, devouring the luxury around her. Leather couches, abstract paintings, a grand piano reduced to kindling. But her eyes found the fire extinguisher mounted near the entrance, half hidden behind a column of smoke. She grabbed it, yanked the pin, and blasted a path through the flames. "I said get out!" The man's voice was weaker now, his chest heaving with shallow, desperate breaths. Up close, she could see the burns on his hands, the way his immaculate suit was singed and torn. But what struck her most were his eyes, dark, fierce, and utterly terrified as they stayed locked on the two carriers beside him. "Not without you," Stephanie choked out. The memory hit her then, sharp and merciless. She was 11 again, standing on that dock in her wet shoes, watching her brother's car tilt into the black water. She'd screamed for help instead of jumping in. She'd waited for adults who came too late. She'd chosen safety over action, and Danny had paid the price. Not this time. She dropped to her knees beside the man, foam from the extinguisher still hissing around them. "Can you walk?" The twins! He could barely get the words out, his lungs shredded by smoke. "I've got them. But you have to move." She didn't wait for permission. Stephanie grabbed the first carrier, surprisingly heavy, a baby boy with thick black hair sleeping impossibly through the chaos, and hooked it over her arm. The second carrier held a baby girl, equally tiny, equally vulnerable. She slung the strap across her shoulder, the weight awkward and terrifying. Then she reached for the man. He was massive compared to her, easily 6 feet of solid muscle barely contained in that ruined designer suit. When she hauled him up by his arm, he stumbled, his legs nearly giving out. But somehow he stayed upright, one hand gripping her shoulder like a vice while the other clutched at his chest. "Fire escape," he rasped, nodding toward a hallway where the flames hadn't yet spread. Stephanie didn't think. She just moved, half dragging him while the carriers bounced against her hips, the babies miraculously still quiet. The smoke was choking her now, burning her throat, making her eyes stream. Behind them, something exploded. Maybe the kitchen, maybe a gas line, and the force of it sent them stumbling forward. They crashed through the fire escape door into blessedly cold night air. Stephanie's lungs screamed as she gulped in oxygen, but she didn't stop. Down the metal stairs, one agonizing flight after another, the man's weight growing heavier with each step as his consciousness flickered. "Stay with me," she commanded, her voice sharp. "I didn't drag you out of hell just to watch you die on the stairs." His dark eyes found hers, and for a moment, something like recognition flickered there. Then his knees buckled. Stephanie caught him, barely, her muscles burning with the effort. They stumbled together into the alley where her battered delivery van waited, ancient and ugly and perfect. She wrenched open the back door and shoved him inside with the last of her strength, the carriers coming down beside him in a nest of blankets and forgotten art supplies. The babies were crying now, finally awake and terrified. So was she. But they were alive. Stephanie drove like the devil was chasing her, because maybe he was. Her hands shook on the wheel as she tore through empty streets, the man's labored breathing filling the van like a death rattle. Every traffic light felt like an eternity. Every siren in the distance made her flinch. She didn't know who had set that fire or why, but instinct screamed that whoever wanted him dead wouldn't stop at one attempt. The warehouse district was abandoned at this hour, a graveyard of failed businesses and forgotten dreams. Maya's studio sat at the end of a dead-end street, its rusted door hidden behind a dumpster. Maya had moved to Portland 3 months ago, but she'd given Stephanie the key, told her to use it whenever she needed space to paint. Stephanie had never imagined she'd be using it to hide a dying man and 2 infants. She killed the engine and ran to open the bay door, muscles screaming in protest. Inside, the studio was exactly as Maya had left it. Drop cloths draped over half-finished canvases, paint supplies scattered across work tables, an ancient space heater in the corner. Dust hung thick in the air, dancing in the beam of her phone's flashlight. It would have to do. She dragged the man inside first, his weight nearly crushing her as she lowered him onto the cleanest drop cloth she could find. His skin was ashen, lips tinged blue. His chest rose and fell in shallow, rattling gasps that made her stomach clench with fear. The babies came next, both screaming now, their tiny faces red with rage and terror. She set the carriers on a table, away from the dust, her mind racing through half-remembered training from a first aid course she'd taken 2 years ago. Airway. Breathing. Circulation. She dropped beside the man and tilted his head back, checking his mouth for obstructions. Clear. But his breathing was wrong, too fast and too shallow, his body fighting for oxygen his smoke-damaged lungs couldn't process. Come on, she whispered, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. His pulse was there but erratic, his skin burning with fever. She ran to the small bathroom in the corner, found a stack of clean rags Maya used for paint cleanup. She soaked them in cold water, brought them back, and pressed one against his forehead. His eyes flickered open, unfocused and glassy. Stay still, she ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. You've got smoke inhalation. Maybe 2nd-degree burns. You need a hospital. No hospital. The words came out strangled, barely audible over the baby's cries. They'll find us. Then you better let me help you. She found Maya's kit of supplies. Scissors, bandages, antiseptic. Not nearly enough, but it would have to work. She cut away the remnants of his dress shirt, revealing a tapestry of tattoos across his chest and arms. Dragons, chrysanthemums, characters in a language she couldn't read. But beneath the ink, she could see the angry red burns on his hands and forearms, the bruising across his ribs. She worked methodically, cleaning the burns with gentle precision, wrapping them in gauze. She elevated his head with rolled canvas, positioned him to ease his breathing. When his fever spiked, she stripped off his jacket and shoes, used cold compresses to bring his temperature down. The babies screamed themselves hoarse, and she managed to find 2 bottles in a diaper bag tucked in one carrier. She fed them one at a time, cradling each tiny body while keeping one eye on the man who'd stopped thrashing and fallen into an uneasy sleep. Dawn was breaking through the grimy windows when his eyes finally opened, clear and focused. And full of questions she wasn't ready to answer. The man sat up slowly, pain etched into every movement, but his eyes were sharp now, predatory and assessing. He studied her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, taking in her paint-stained jeans, the soot smeared across her cheek, the way she positioned herself between him and the babies. You should have left me, he said. his voice rough as gravel but steadier than before. People keep telling me what I should have done. Stephanie crossed her arms, exhaustion making her reckless. I'm getting tired of it. Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. Then it vanished, replaced by cold calculation. He glanced at the twins, both finally asleep in their carriers, swaddled in her spare hoodies, and his expression softened for just a moment before hardening again. What's your name? Stephanie Holloway. And you are? Larry Hammond. He paused, watching her face for recognition. When she showed none, he continued, head of the Hwajae Clan. The words meant nothing to her. Is that supposed to be impressive? It means I'm a dead man who shouldn't be alive. He pushed himself up straighter, wincing. And it means you're in more danger than you can possibly understand. Stephanie felt ice crawl down her spine. The fire wasn't an accident. No. His jaw clenched. The delivery order was a setup. Someone inside my organization sold me out, lured me to that penthouse with a fake meeting. They knew I'd bring Juno and Nori. I always bring them when I travel. They're safer with me than anywhere else. He laughed, bitter and sharp. Or so I thought. Who would want you dead? That's the question, isn't it? Larry's eyes went distant, calculating. The Hwajae clan controls half the underground commerce in this city. Weapons, information, protection. We have alliances with the Italians, agreements with the Russians. But alliances are only as strong as the fear that maintains them. He looked at her directly now. Someone inside my own ranks decided the twins made me weak. Decided it was time for new leadership. The magnitude of what she'd stumbled into hit her like a freight train. Stephanie sank onto an overturned crate, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. I'm just a delivery driver. An art student. I don't know anything about any of this. You know enough. His voice was gentle now, almost apologetic. You saw my face. You know I have children. You know I was targeted. And whoever set that fire knows you pulled me out. How would they? Security cameras in the building. Street cameras. Your van. He gestured vaguely toward the bay door. By now, they'll have your plates, your name, everything. They'll know you brought me here. Stephanie's hands started shaking. So what are you saying? Larry met her eyes, and she saw something in them that made her blood run cold. Not cruelty, but absolute certainty. I'm saying your old life ended the moment you walked into that penthouse. You're a witness, an accomplice, a liability. If my enemies find you before I secure you, they'll torture you for my location, then kill you. If my own people find you first. He trailed off. Some of them might show mercy. This can't be happening. It already has. He stood, every movement controlled despite the pain. So now you have a choice. You can run, try to disappear, and pray they never find you. Or... He looked at the twins, then back at her. Or you stay. You help me identify the traitor, and I give you something your student loans and delivery tips never could. What's that? Power. Protection. A place in a world where you'll never be helpless again. His voice dropped. You saved my children. That means something in my world. It means everything. Stephanie looked at the babies, so small and innocent in the harsh warehouse light. Then at Larry, this dangerous stranger who just offered her a devil's bargain. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate. Where are you? Someone came by asking about you. Cops, maybe? Seemed off. The choice, she realized, had already been made. Stephanie smelled it before she saw anything. A sickly sweet odor that didn't belong, cutting through the dust and paint fumes like poison through water. Her head snapped up from where she'd been checking Nori's diaper. Larry was across the room, examining something on his phone with a burner SIM card he'd pulled from a hidden pocket. The twins had been fussy for the past 10 minutes, their cries escalating from irritable to distressed. That smell. Her eyes went to the ventilation grate near the ceiling, and her blood turned to ice. A thin, colorless vapor was seeping through the metal slats, barely visible in the morning light but unmistakable once she'd noticed it. Larry! The studio door exploded inward. A figure in black tactical gear moved with lethal precision, a canister in one gloved hand still hissing its deadly payload into the air. The assassin's other hand went for a weapon, but Stephanie was already moving. She grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy bronze sculpture Maya had been working on, and hurled it with everything she had. It caught the assassin in the shoulder, throwing off their aim as a silenced gunshot punched through a canvas behind Larry's head. The babies! Larry's shout cut through her panic as he launched himself at the assassin. But Stephanie was already there. She scooped up both carriers, her muscles screaming in protest at the weight, and ran for the bathroom, the only room with a door that closed. Her lungs were burning, her vision starting to blur at the edges. Whatever was in that gas, it was fast. She slammed the door and shoved a towel against the gap at the bottom. Her hands fumbled with the faucet, soaking another towel in cold water. The babies were coughing now, their tiny faces turning red, their cries weakening. No. Absolutely not. Stephanie held the wet towel over their faces, creating a makeshift filter. Her first aid training screamed at her. Fresh air, oxygen, get them to a hospital. But there was no time, no option, just her and these two fragile lives depending on her. The sounds from the studio were terrible. Crashes, grunts of pain, the meaty impact of fists on flesh. But she couldn't think about that. Nori's lips were turning blue. She grabbed Juno's carrier, held it high near the small window above the toilet, and smashed the glass with her elbow. Pain lanced through her arm but she ignored it, letting fresh air flood in. She held both babies up to the broken window, the cold morning air hitting their faces. Breathe, she commanded, her voice fierce. Come on, breathe. Juno gasped first, then started crying. Real, angry, alive crying. Nori followed a heartbeat later, her tiny chest heaving as she sucked in air. The bathroom door shook on its hinges. Stephanie! Larry's voice. Urgent. She yanked the door open. Larry stood there, his bandages soaked with fresh blood, his knuckles split open. Behind him, the assassin lay crumpled on the floor, neck bent at an unnatural angle. The gas was already dissipating through the open bay door Larry had forced open. They're okay, she gasped. The twins are okay. Larry's eyes went from the babies to her bloody arm to her face, and something shifted in his expression. Something raw and absolute. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and cupped her face with his damaged hands. You just killed yourself for my children. She was shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a tidal wave. I couldn't let them. I know. His voice was soft, almost reverent. That's why you're mine now. Whether you want to be or not. He turned to the dead assassin, his expression going cold. And now we know exactly who sent them. Larry dragged the assassin's body into the corner and covered it with a paint-stained tarp, his movements methodical despite his injuries. Stephanie sat on the floor, both babies cradled against her chest, their tiny heartbeats thundering against her ribs like frantic birds. She couldn't stop shaking. The tattoo on his neck, Larry said, voice flat. That's the mark of the inner circle. My own counsel. He turned to face her, and his expression was carved from stone. They sent someone I've eaten with. Someone who knows my children's names. Stephanie pressed her face against Juno's soft hair, breathing in his baby smell to ground herself. What happens now? Now! Larry crouched in front of her, eye level, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark irises. Now I tell you the truth. You're not a witness anymore. You're not collateral damage. You're the woman who saved my life twice in 12 hours and fought an assassin with your bare hands to protect my children. I didn't think. I just... Exactly. He reached out, his burned hand gentle as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You didn't calculate odds or weigh options. You moved. Like a mother. Like a queen. His voice dropped lower. Like someone who belongs in my world. I don't belong anywhere near your world. I'm a broke art student who can barely pay rent. You were. Larry's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and she felt the touch all the way down to her bones. That girl died in the fire. The woman sitting here with my children in her arms? She's something else entirely. Nori made a small sound, and Stephanie adjusted her automatically, supporting her head with practiced ease despite never having held a baby before yesterday. The gesture wasn't lost on Larry. She watched his eyes track the movement, saw something fierce and possessive flash across his face. I'm offering you everything, Stephanie. He said her name like a vow. Protection that makes Fort Knox look like a cardboard box. Money that makes your student debt look like pocket change. Power to make sure you never freeze again, never fail to act, never watch helplessly while people you love suffer. In exchange for what? For staying. For being exactly who you've proven yourself to be. He glanced at the twins. Juno and Nori need someone who'll break every rule to keep them safe. Someone the threat of death won't stop. I need someone I can trust absolutely in a world where trust is rarer than diamonds. You don't even know me. I know the only thing that matters. Larry's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on Juno's back. I know you could have run 3 times. I know you chose to stay, to fight, to bleed. Everything else? We have time to learn. Stephanie looked at the broken window, the dead assassin under the tarp, the tiny lives breathing against her chest. She thought about her apartment with the eviction notice on the door. Her mountains of debt. Her safe, small life that had felt like drowning in slow motion. That life was gone. Larry was right about that much. If I say yes, she whispered, there's no going back. No. His answer was immediate. There isn't. She met his eyes, saw the absolute certainty there, the promise and the threat wrapped together. Then I'm in. All the way. Larry smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look almost human beneath the danger. Good. Because I wasn't planning to let you go anyway. He leaned in and pressed his forehead to hers, the contact grounding and intimate. Welcome to the Hwajae Clan, Stephanie Holloway. You're mine now. And I protect what's mine. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they felt like the first solid ground she'd stood on in years. They moved fast. Larry had Stephanie pull her van into the warehouse, then systematically stripped it of anything traceable. License plates, registration, the GPS unit stuck to the dashboard she'd forgotten existed. He laid their phones on the concrete floor and crushed them beneath his heel with cold efficiency, the screen splintering like ice. There's a car 2 blocks from here, he said, already moving. Registered to a shell company, clean plates, untraceable. I keep safe houses and vehicles scattered throughout the city for situations exactly like this. You planned for your own people trying to kill you? I planned for every contingency. He was strapping the twins into their carriers, his movements quick but careful. In my world, paranoia isn't a disorder. It's a survival skill. 20 minutes later, they were on the road in a nondescript Honda sedan that looked like every other car on the highway. Stephanie drove while Larry sat in back with the babies, his phone, a different one, pulled from a hidden compartment in the car, pressed to his ear as he made rapid calls in Korean. The city was waking up around them. Morning commuters, coffee shops opening, the world spinning on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Stephanie's hands were steady on the wheel, her mind eerily clear despite the exhaustion dragging at her bones. We'll take the northern route, Larry said, ending another call. There's a compound 3 hours from here, deep in the mountains. Loyal people, heavy security. We hole up there while I root out the traitor. And then I remind the inner circle why betrayal comes with a price. Stephanie was about to respond when Larry's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. Stop the car. What? Pull over. Now. She swerved into a gas station parking lot, her heart hammering. Larry was staring at his phone, his knuckles white around the device. When he looked up, his face was carved from granite. It's an emergency signal. From someone I trust. He met her eyes in the rearview mirror. The northern route is compromised. They have teams at every checkpoint, every rest stop, every place we could reasonably exit. They're not just hunting us, they're hurting us. Stephanie felt ice flood her veins. How is that possible? Because the traitor isn't just someone in the inner circle. Larry's voice was quiet, deadly. It's someone who knows my protocols, my safe houses, my escape routes. He looked out the window, jaw clenched. Someone I trusted enough to share everything with. So what do we do? Larry was silent for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his thigh, the first sign of agitation she'd seen from him. We can't go north. Can't go south. That's controlled by the Volkov Bratva, and they'll sell us out for the right price. East takes us through too much open highway, too easy to intercept. He closed his eyes. West is the ports, which means... His phone buzzed again. This time, when he read the message, something dark crossed his face. What? They know we're in this car. They know we're moving west. He looked at her, and she saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Genuine concern. Stephanie, they're not trying to kill us anymore. They're trying to capture us. Which means they want information, leverage. His eyes dropped to the twins. They want hostages. Tell me you have a plan. I do. Larry's voice was grim. But you're not going to like it. Larry's plan involved an abandoned industrial park near the docks and enough hubris to make Stephanie's stomach churn. We make them think we're cornered, he'd said. Force them to come to us on our terms. Now, sitting in the skeletal remains of an old processing plant with the twins hidden behind a rusted conveyor belt, Stephanie wondered if his terms included all of them dying. She heard them before she saw them. The crunch of gravel, the tactical precision of footsteps surrounding the building. Larry stood in the center of the space, illuminated by dusty shafts of light through the broken roof, looking every inch the dangerous man he was despite the bandages and burns. I know you're out there, he called, his voice echoing off metal walls. Let's finish this. The shadows moved. 6 figures emerged from different entry points, weapons raised, faces hidden behind masks. Professional. Coordinated. Lethal. Then the leader stepped forward, and Stephanie's entire world tilted sideways. He pulled off his mask, and she was looking at a face she knew as well as her own reflection. Sandy blonde hair perfectly styled despite the tactical gear. Sharp jawline. Blue eyes that used to make her believe in fairy tales. Hello, Stephanie, Caspian Lee said, his voice smooth as poisoned honey. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't process. Caspian. Surprised. He smiled that smile she'd once loved, the one that had convinced her a tech millionaire could actually want a struggling art student. You shouldn't be. You were always terrible at seeing what was right in front of you. Larry's eyes cut to her, sharp and assessing. You know him. Her voice cracked. He was my fiancé. We broke up 6 months ago. Broke up? Caspian laughed. Cold and bitter. Is that what we're calling it? You walked away from everything I offered you, Stephanie. The penthouse, the lifestyle, the security. All because you wanted to find yourself through your art. He spat the last word like a curse. And now look at you. Playing house with a gangster and his bastards. Watch your mouth. The words came out of Stephanie before she could stop them. Sharp and deadly. Caspian's eyebrows rose. Protective already? How touching. Tell me, did he mention that he's the reason your brother died? The world stopped. What? Stephanie heard herself say from very far away. The car accident 9 years ago. The one that drove you into therapy and debt and my arms. Caspian gestured to Larry with his weapon. The Hwajae Clan was running an illegal street racing operation that night. Your brother was collateral damage. A loose end that slipped through the cracks. You're lying. But even as she said it, she saw the truth flicker across Larry's face. Recognition, calculation, and something that might have been regret. Am I? Ask him. Caspian's smile widened. I've spent 6 months researching the Hwajae Clan after you walked away from me. Learning their weaknesses, building alliances with their enemies. The inner circle was easy to buy. They were already tired of following a man who let fatherhood soften him. He took a step closer. And you, my darling ex-fiancé, led me straight to him. That delivery order? I placed it. That penthouse? Mine. I knew your financial desperation would make you take the job. I knew you'd see that fire and play hero. Stephanie felt like she was falling through ice. You tried to kill him. To kill babies. No, I tried to capture him. The fire was meant to be contained, controlled. But Hammond here is harder to kill than expected. Caspian's eyes hardened. So now I adapt. You hand over Hammond and his brats, and I let you walk away. Alive. Rich even. I'll forgive the broken engagement. You're insane. I'm practical. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Larry. Last chance, Stephanie. Choose the life you were meant for, or die with a man who's responsible for the worst moment of your existence. Stephanie's hand found the rusted pipe behind her back, the one Larry had positioned there when they'd scouted the building, when he'd whispered, "Trust me," against her ear like a prayer. You want me to choose? She met Caspian's eyes, saw the smug certainty there. Fine. She hurled the pipe straight at his head. Everything exploded into chaos. Larry moved like violence made flesh. He dropped low as Caspian's men opened fire, using the conveyor belt for cover, and came up with a weapon he'd hidden in the machinery. 2 shots, 2 bodies down. He was on the 3rd man before the body hit the ground, disarming him with brutal efficiency and using him as a human shield. Stephanie ran for the twins, their screams piercing through the gunfire. She grabbed both carriers and sprinted for the service exit Larry had marked, her lungs burning, her legs pumping pure adrenaline. Behind her, she heard Caspian shouting orders, heard the meaty sound of impact as Larry fought his way through trained killers like they were paper. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. The babies needed her. She burst through the exit into blinding daylight. The Honda was exactly where Larry said it would be. Keys in the ignition, engine running. She threw the carriers into the back seat and dove into the driver's seat just as Larry came through the door, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. Drive! She floored it as bullets punched through the rear window, safety glass exploding in a shower of crystalline rain. Larry twisted in his seat, returning fire with cold precision until they screamed around a corner and the industrial park disappeared behind them. Is he alive? Larry confirmed, his voice tight. But not for long. They drove for 2 hours, switching cars twice, taking random turns until even Stephanie was lost. Finally, Larry directed her to a cabin buried so deep in the woods that GPS couldn't find it. It was small, isolated, and perfect. The moment they were inside, adrenaline gave way to something else entirely. Larry set the twins down, both miraculously asleep after crying themselves out, and turned to Stephanie. His hands were shaking, she realized. This man who'd killed without hesitation was shaking as he looked at her. You chose, he said, his voice raw. You could have walked away. Could have let Caspian. I chose you. Stephanie closed the distance between them, her own hands trembling as she reached for his face. I chose us. I chose them. Why? His forehead pressed against hers, his breath hot on her lips. Why would you choose this life? This danger? Why would you choose me? Because you're the first person who ever saw me as strong instead of broken. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. Because those babies need me. Because I'm tired of running from who I really am. And who are you? Yours, she breathed. I'm yours. Larry kissed her like he was drowning and she was air. Like she was the only solid thing in a world burning down around them. His hands found her waist, her back, pulling her flush against him with desperate intensity. She kissed him back with equal fervor, tasting smoke and violence and something sweeter underneath. Her fingers traced the edge of his bandages, careful even in passion, and he groaned against her mouth. They broke apart only long enough to stumble toward the bedroom, clothes falling away like old skin. When he laid her down on unfamiliar sheets, his eyes held a question. She answered by pulling him down to her, by wrapping herself around him like armor, by choosing him again and again with every touch, every breath, every moment they claimed from the ashes of their old lives. Later, tangled together in the dark, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her skin, Larry spoke against her hair. No going back now. I know, Stephanie whispered. I don't want to. 6 months later, Stephanie stood on the balcony of the Hwajae compound, watching the city lights glitter below like fallen stars. She barely recognized the woman in the reflection of the glass doors behind her. Sleek black suit tailored to perfection, hair swept back in an elegant twist, a thin scar along her forearm from that night in the warehouse now worn like a badge of honor. The girl who delivered takeout for tip money felt like a ghost from someone else's life. Inside, she could hear Larry on a conference call, his voice smooth and lethal as he negotiated terms with a rival syndicate. The twins, walking now, barely, were supposed to be napping but were instead staging what sounded like a jailbreak from their nursery. Their laughter made her smile. Her phone buzzed. A message from her lieutenant, Marcus. The Lee situation is handled. No loose ends. Caspian had disappeared the day after the shootout, gone underground with what remained of his allies. It had taken Stephanie 3 months of careful investigation, strategic pressure, and one very pointed conversation with his former business partners to flush him out. She'd been the one to authorize the final operation. Her signature on the order as steady as her hand had been holding that bronze sculpture. She didn't feel guilty. That was perhaps the most surprising part. You're thinking too loud. Larry's arms slid around her waist from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Even now, 6 months of living in his world, his touch still made her pulse quicken. Just reflecting, she said, leaning back into his warmth. On what? On how I used to think I was drowning. Student debt, dead-end job, guilt over Danny that I carried like stones in my pockets. She turned in his arms to face him. I thought that was my life. Treading water until I finally went under. And now? Now I realize I wasn't drowning. I was just waiting to find something worth swimming toward. She reached up to trace the line of his jaw, the gesture familiar and intimate. You gave me that. Purpose. Power. A family. A crash from inside made them both turn. Juno appeared in the doorway, somehow having escaped his crib. His face lit with mischievous triumph. Nori's wail of protest at being left behind followed immediately after. Your children are staging a coup, Stephanie said, already moving toward them. Our children, Larry corrected, catching her hand. You've been their mother in every way that matters since the night you carried them out of that fire. The word settled over her like a crown. Heavy, permanent, earned. Mother. Queen. Partner. Survivor. She scooped up Juno while Larry retrieved Nori, and they stood there in the doorway, a family forged in flame and violence and desperate choice. The compound stretched out around them, full of loyal soldiers, strategic allies, and the weight of an empire built on blood and power. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Do you ever regret it? Larry asked quietly, reading her mind like he so often did. Choosing this? Choosing us. Stephanie looked at the man who'd given her purpose, at the children who'd given her love, at the strength she'd discovered in herself when every other option was stripped away. She thought about the girl she'd been. Frozen, guilty, drowning, and the woman she'd become. Not for a single second, she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. She was no longer the girl who froze on the dock. She was the Queen of Embers, forged in fire, and she would burn down anyone who threatened her family. That wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Sometimes the life you're supposed to live isn't the one you planned. Sometimes it's the one that finds you in the flames, demanding you choose between who you were and who you're capable of becoming. Stephanie learned that frozen moments don't define us. What we do after the freeze does. She learned that strength isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And most importantly, she learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's forged in fire, built on impossible choices, and stronger for it. If you've ever felt trapped in a life too small for who you're meant to be, remember, transformation doesn't ask permission. It demands courage. Thank you for watching Stephanie's journey from delivery driver to queen. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Was it the warehouse fight? The betrayal reveal? The final transformation? And let me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from you.